All right. Con su permiso, I'm going to erase this board because I think I just might be drawing a few things out over here. After all, we've already covered most of it, so I think we know what's coming up. And the slides that I have here are kind of a general talk on geology. And so I'm going to run off of my slides a little bit here and there so I can focus a little bit on some of the aspects of apologetics that come in with geology here as well. But in order to do that, we have to lay down some foundation. We got to lay down a grade level to understand what it is that we're actually going to be talking about and how geologists think about their discipline and think about what they're doing. So I brought along a bunch of rocks in a big bucket here. And a good number of these are actually local rocks that I've picked up and collected from different areas. Some of them right here around Lynchburg, others in northern Virginia, stuff from Colorado and whatnot. So I'm going to be thinking about rocks and thinking about other things that geologists think about, but it kind of starts with rocks, which gets me excited because I'm a geologist and a paleontologist. I study both because after all, the fossils that we were looking at are found inside rocks, and I care about that context. I care about that. For vertebrate paleontologists, that is, paleontologists that study animals with backbones, there's kind of two routes that you can take to that. One is to study them as animals that have been fossilized. And so there's a very strong biological track that many people in paleontology take because they're interested in biological questions. What is this organism? How did it behave? What did it do? Where was it located in predators and prey? And what was its ecosystem like? But then there's other questions that you can come at from a geological perspective, and that's kind of the route that I took. Fossils are found in the rocks, and they tell us things about what's going on with the rocks at the time that they're formed. So we're going to take a look at a couple of things here. What is geology? The rock cycle, who studies geology, and then a little bit about what the Bible tells us about geology, and I might jump out from this from time to time. So starting off first, we're going to look at what is geology and the rock cycle and how rocks form, right? So geology is the study of the solid earth. Geos is the Greek word for earth. If you've heard of other terms like that, a geosphere or a geoid or stuff like that, it's all coming back from this geo, or the study geography is geography. It's the tracing of the earth. Graphy means basically the writing. What is the land like of the earth? So it's a lot about rocks, what rocks are, and then there's the very practical side of geology. How can rocks be used in ways that are beneficial to us? That's really what most people kind of care about. How many of you have been in a class where you learned about rocks and minerals so far? Okay, like 5th grade? Hit that in 5th grade sometimes? Kindergarten? Oh no, that's a while ago, right? How many of you are asked the question, why are we learning this? Yeah, we have some honest hands. We have. So sometimes you ask the question, and it's a good question. Why am I learning this? I asked that question when I was in school. I started learning things like pre-calculus, and I had a lot of questions like, what am I ever going to use this for? And I wasn't disinterested in learning it. I was just wondering, like, so what does this get used for? What's the point of this? Well, it turns out geology has a lot of practical applications. We wouldn't be in this room right now if it wasn't for geology. That's kind of level practical. We also study geology to understand how the earth is operating and working. What are the forces that are involved in the earth? Why do volcanoes and earthquakes happen, and why do they happen in certain places but not in other ones? So the study of the earth is going to help us answer those types of questions about things like natural hazards and how rocks form and the stories that they can tell, right? So Nico Steno was one of those first people to ask a rock to tell it its story. And the rock started speaking, in a sense, right? He started getting the tools of his mind to be able to look at a rock and start to get an idea that there was a story to be told here. So, rocks and minerals. Before I get onto the rock cycle, and we start talking about the rock cycle, we have to understand what rocks are. Now, rocks, like this, are heavy things, right? They're stuff, you drive out and you see that there's rocks on the side of the road. How many of you have rocks in your driveway? Gravel driveway, yep. Little gray rocks, look pretty boring. They're coming from a quarry here in Lynchburg, right next to the airport. Pretty dull-looking rocks. I don't put those in our geology kits because they're boring. But there are other rocks that I do put in our geology kits. Here's one, and this rock is coming from South Dakota. I lived in South Dakota for a while. And this is a granite. So how many of you have heard of the type of rock granite? So granite is an igneous rock. But why do we call it, or this granite has got more than one thing to it. As I hold it out here, especially out over here, you can see that there's pink material. There's some kind of grayish material here as well. There's some silvery gray material here as well. A granite is a rock, and rocks are composed of minerals. So the way I like to think of it is minerals are like Lego bricks, and rocks are the things that you build out of them. So if we think about our minerals are our Lego bricks. They're things like this. That silvery mineral is this one. Ah, good guess. But no, not quite. Slate is a type of rock made of mud particles. This is a mineral that's falling apart, but that's not surprising because this is the mineral called mica. Mica. You got a brother named Micah? Is he thin and flaky too? No. My eldest son is named Micah, but they're not spelled the same. The Micah that my son is named after the book in the Bible, M-I-C-A-H, and that A-H is the name of God. That's Yahweh. Micah gets that. It's that same root. This one is mica, M-I-C-A. There's no H on it. And mica is a mineral that forms in like these big stacks and sheets and actually can be peeled apart really easily. Oh, he's so strong. He just took a rock and just tore it apart. I won't even look. So mica is a certain type of mineral, and a mineral is formed by a repeating pattern of chemistry. So the atoms that make up a tiny little piece of mica are just built on the same pattern over and over and over again to make a really big mica. And that's a little bit different from the rock because the rock over here has got mica, but then it's got this pink thing next to it. And that pink thing is a mineral called feldspar. And next to it is some of this other gray stuff, and that is quartz. So here's a mineral of quartz, just one mineral, and it forms these nice hexagons with little points up at the top. When it's allowed to grow whatever way that it can. It will always grow in this particular way. But you'll never find these inside the granite because the quartz just fills in like these little cavities and just fills in whatever shape the cavity is. But the quartz that's in the rock has the same chemistry as the quartz that's just by itself. It's got the same hardness. They're both glassy looking and kind of clearish and things like that. So here's one Lego brick. This is another type of Lego brick. And these two together will form a Lego thing. It's amazing. So I got this rock. This is granite. So is this. Now, they don't look exactly the same. This one looks cooler? Here, catch. No, I was just... Yeah, who wants a rock? We're not shot putting the rocks. That's not going to happen. So these are both granite because both of them have feldspar, mica, and quartz in them. It's just that the feldspars are different. This has a white feldspar in it. This one has a pink one. This one has a black mica, and this one has a silvery mica. And as a result, granites can take on a lot of different colors to them. So if you go to, how many times have you had to be dragged over to Lowe's and Home Depot because your parents wanted to look at, granite countertops and stuff? It's terrible. You end up like hiding inside of a dryer for a while. Don't do that. So this was mica. This is a type of mineral called muscovite mica. It's named after Moscow. This is biotite mica. It's another type of mica. It also peels apart really easily, but it's really dark black. Look at, they believe that. Come on. We're not juggling the rocks. That's very dangerous. Okay, so we start off with minerals, and minerals are a group of chemicals that are ordered together and have a repeating pattern of the same thing over and over again. You eat minerals every day. Salt, not pepper. Pepper is a plant. It's the seeds of a plant, but salt is a mineral. So geologists, all right. So geologists first going to learn about minerals because they're going to help us understand rocks later on. And then we know that there are 3 kinds of rocks. Anybody know one of the types of rocks? Metamorphic, excellent. What's another one? Igneous. And sedimentary. Excellent, excellent, very well done. So I brought along a variety of different igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic rocks here as I talk about what's called the rock cycle. How many of you heard about the rock cycle before? All right, good. So we can move fast. So we got 3 kinds of rocks, and the different sorts of rocks are formed in different ways. Remember that our igneous rocks, like our granites, or this basalt, which is a lava rock like you'd see in Hawaii, but I got this in Northern Virginia. We don't have a volcano there, but we have some basalt. And these are rocks that form initially from some sort of molten magma or lava. And they cool down, and as they cool down, the minerals inside start to grow. They basically freeze. They go from liquid to solid. And as that happens more and more, eventually the whole magma becomes solid and is now a rock. Okay? So igneous rocks, we can start off that way and think about, well, how do you turn an igneous rock into a sedimentary rock? That's awesome, excellent. So you've got to have that igneous rock sticking out somewhere of a hill, right? And then it gets beaten up by wind and water and rain and stuff like that, and it gets turned into small minerals and stuff that collects down in the streams and gets carried away and makes sediment, and then that sediment gets layered, right? Remember Nico Steno was saying he found layers of rocks that were tilted, and he was like, but they couldn't have started out that way because things like sandstone, which is this rock over here. I got this in Virginia, but I got it from Go Stone, that place here down on Timberlake Road. Like, hey, that's a nice looking rock. I'm going to take that and break it up and put it in rock kits. So I just bash it with a hammer until it's the right shape. Yeah, that's what we do at our business. We break rocks. Yeah. And since you're underage, I can pay you a lot less. No, I didn't say that. Anyway. Shh, I'm not hiring junior high kids. That's against the law. All right, so you guys have to fill out all sorts of paperwork for that. And then I have to fill out paperwork. I don't like paperwork. So this sandstone is made up of sand grains, and the sand grains are most often quartz. So yeah, when you're, if you go to the beach, if you go to Virginia Beach or down to the Outer Banks and you walk along that nice soft sand, all of those little sand grains are actually just tiny powderized pieces of quartz. Because quartz doesn't kind of break down aside from getting smaller, it doesn't chemically react. And so even though the diamond salespeople will say diamonds are forever, no, quartz is forever. Quartz never goes away. It just makes smaller quartz. That's it. So sandstone is formed by breaking quartz out of things like granites, and those little quartz pieces tumble away and become smaller and smaller, get ground into dust and become sandstone. It's not the only type of sedimentary rock, but that's one of them. Well, a sedimentary rock can be turned into a metamorphic rock if that sedimentary rock is buried under a lot of pressure. And I heard somebody say heat. Heat and pressure are the 2 things that can convert that sandstone into something else. And it could take a different type of material. It could take a limestone, which is also a sedimentary rock. This one has a bunch of little fossils on it. And it could convert it, that limestone into this rock, which I got from Apologetics. This is marble. So marble can be all sorts of different colors. Usually it's white or gray. This one has some cool pink in it. Nope. I had to go there. I had to go to the quarry with a trailer and get 2,000 pounds of marble. I'm a happy guy. Happy geologist. Driving back was scary because I have a minivan. I don't have a truck. So it's like, oh, I don't know about this. So adding heat and pressure changes the mineral that makes up limestone, which is called calcite. Changes that mineral and forces the mineral to become bigger and bigger and bigger. It destroys any fossils that might be in there, and you end up with just all these cool calcite grains. And marble's a neat material because it's very easily worked and shaped. So you go up to an art place and they've got marble sculptures. The reason they're using marble is it's a fairly soft rock that breaks very well and doesn't break in like big flat units or things like that. So it's a practical stone for building. Well, if a metamorphic rock is eventually heated up so much that it melts again, then when that melted rock cools, it once again becomes an igneous rock. And that's why they call this the rock cycle, is you can go around from one type of rock into another. And there's also other ways in which you can get these things too. You can get metamorphic rocks from igneous rocks. For example, if you took this igneous rock, this granite, and you put it under a lot of heat and a lot of pressure, not so much that it melts, but enough that it kind of gets baked really weird. Think about metamorphism like baking bread. You've got a bread dough, and that dough is not the tastiest thing. I still have little weird children who like eating bread dough sometimes. They're like, oh, this is like, oh, stop that, right? But instead, if you take that bread dough and you put it in an oven at 350 degrees, it will alter the chemistry of the bread dough and turn it into actual bread. Metamorphism for rocks is much the same. You can take something that's at a certain temperature, and then if you add lots of heat and lots of pressure, it'll alter into something that looks kind of like this. Now, they look pretty similar. This is a rock called gneiss. I'll let you stew on those jokes for a while. No, there's no naughty rock, but that's a good one. I'll have to use that. So this is called gneiss. Now, it's a German word, and it's spelled G-N-E-I-S-S. Gneiss. Now, it looks pretty similar to our granite, but the difference is kind of organization. You can see that there's kind of like these striping patterns here. And there's no stripe patterns on the granite. The granite is kind of chaos, and this one is a little bit more organized. But they're both made actually of feldspar and mica. There's feldspar and mica here, so they have a lot of the same chemistry. So you don't want to mix them up. Don't take me for granite just because I'm nice, okay? Oh, yes! Oh, yes! Thank you. Thank you. That joke was told to me by ancient professors when I was young. I have no idea how old that is, but I'm a creationist. It can only be a few thousand years old. All right, so the rock cycle gets us through relationships. I'll skip this. All right. Other aspects that geologists are interested in are things like plate tectonics. You probably heard a little bit about this too. Crust, that's right. Bread has a crust. The earth has a crust. The earth has a mantle. That's right. The theory of plate tectonics is attempting to explain why it is that the continents and the ocean basins happen to be in the places that they are, and why it looks like they might have shifted and moved over time. Because there are, like I said, there are fossils in North America that match fossils in Africa. And the mountains of Morocco, for example, they're called the Atlas Mountains, have a lot of the same geology as the Appalachians do. It seems like they were once together. In fact, if you take Africa and you stick it next to North America, and you take part of Europe, you bring it over next to North America, the Atlas Mountains, the Appalachians, and then the Scottish Highlands and the Scandinavian Mountains all form a nice single long mountain. You're like, well, that's maybe not coincidence. That those mountains were formed when Africa and North America collided with one another at some point in the past, and the collision forced the mountains upward and buckled and bended them. And then when North America and Africa split apart, they each took some of those mountains with them. We ended up with a lot more, for whatever reason. And plate tectonics, that's all right, you can hold my calls. Plate tectonics helps to give us a better context for understanding why natural disasters happen and why they happen in certain places but not in others. So we live here in Virginia, and Virginia geologically is a fairly boring state. Snow and geologically boring, not weather-wise. Weather-wise is like whiplash. It's 80 degrees today. The other day it was 20 degrees at night, you know. So we don't have major earthquakes here in Virginia, although I'm sure Mr. Hill remembers the earthquake that we had in 2011. That place was moving, I heard. I was on the first floor of the old science building and I felt nothing. It was disappointing. A magnitude 6 earthquake hit Virginia and the geologist on campus felt nothing. Like, I should lose my job over this. That was terrible. I walked into my class that was meeting down on the first floor of DeMoss, and all the students were like, Dr. Ross, there was an earthquake. Did you feel it? I'm like, whatever. And then they're like, no. So I pulled up the website of the U.S. Geological Survey, because I'm a nerd like that. And sure enough, they were reporting like a magnitude 5.8 earthquake. I was like, what? I felt 2 of the aftershocks later that night, which was really cool. There were 2 magnitude 4, 4.3 aftershocks. And you could feel like this wave, this ripple go through the house. It was like, and I was like, oh. I felt an earthquake. I was so excited. That's right. My voice did that too. I was like, ah! So why did an earthquake happen in Virginia when normally they don't, right? When we think of earthquakes, we think of California and places like that. The west coast of the United States has lots of earthquakes because from plate tectonics, we know that there's forces of North America moving to the west, and the Pacific Ocean is either not moving or moving a little to the east. And so that movement this way results in a whole bunch of volcanoes and earthquakes and things like that. Here on the east coast of North America is moving to the west, and the ocean next to us is attached to the continent and also moving to the west at the same rate. So we don't get any of those sorts of movements that are going to cause friction or stress, except for every once in a while we have an old fault from when the Appalachians were formed, and every once in a while it relaxes or has some sort of chiropractic event and goes, and we're like, whoa, what happened on the East Coast? We had an earthquake. And everybody panics, and like in Washington, D.C., everybody ran out of the Capitol building, and the government shut down for a while. There was much rejoicing. But then the next day, everybody went back to work. But why earthquakes happen, where volcanoes occur and why they erupt, and why tsunamis happen in certain places but not others. That's right, they happen because ultimately there's an earthquake deep under the water. And geology is the way to help understand the way the world works. Thinking at it from an apologetic standpoint especially, we might ask, like, why does God allow things like natural disasters to happen? And there's no easy answer for that. I mean, on the one hand, the easy answer is, well, Adam and Eve sinned and fell in the garden, and because of that, the world doesn't work the way that it ought to. And that's true. And in history, then, their children's children got so bad that at one point God looks at the earth, and in Genesis 6 he says that his heart won't always strive with mankind. And he describes mankind as having a heart and a mind that was only evil all the time. And it said after that, and God's heart was filled with pain. And so God brought a flood of judgment upon the earth to wipe the slate clean. I don't have time today to talk about some of the theology behind the flood and what the Bible is doing in ways that you had no idea what was going on. But here's a hint. I want you guys, when you get a chance, read Genesis 1 and then read Genesis 8 and compare the sequence of events in Genesis 1 and Genesis 8. And you will be amazed at the way that the flood is starting the world all over again. It's a recreation, in a sense. And the movements of the continents during the flood are largely what's making the flood happening in the first place. And these earthquakes, these tsunamis, these volcanoes that we have today are part of the repercussions of the flood. They're part of the leftovers of the events of the flood. And so on the one hand, my answer for why does God allow these things to happen, it's because of human sin, and it's because of his judgment. And now these things, if we have the eyes to see them, and if we have the ears to hear properly, we can recognize these as the reminders of God's judgment. It might not explain why a particular earthquake happened, or why a particular group of people suffered mightily at a natural disaster, but it is a reminder of why the world is the way that it is. Now, there's some good things in geology, too. We don't just study all the bad stuff. We study the bad stuff because we're scared about it, right? We're scared about volcanoes. We're scared about earthquakes. We want to know why so that we can be prepared for them and maybe, build our way around them. But we also get a tremendous amount of natural resources from the earth. And right from the very beginning of Genesis, we actually see this talked about. In Genesis chapter 2, when God is describing Eden and the surrounding areas around it, he mentions the land of Havilah, that there's gold there, and the gold in the land is good. Well, gold is a geological resource. So right from the very beginning, God's talking about things and saying there are resources out there that you will find pleasant and helpful. In our modern world, our resources are largely concerned with energy and building, and we use things like petroleum and natural gas for energy to make either our cars move or to heat our homes, or to do other sorts of stuff. The big bucket truck up over there, that giant dump truck, will carry a load of approximately 60 tons. This dump truck is so large that there is a ladder on the side to walk up so that you can get into the cockpit over here. So a person stands about this tall. That's a huge dump truck. And this is, we call them steam shovels. They don't really run on steam power anymore, but it's an old name for it. And every scoop of this is probably about 30 to 40 tons of coal. It's an amazing machine. These are some of the largest machines on Earth. All of the biggest machines that people have ever made in the modern world right now, they're mining machines. Because we use gobs and gobs of stuff from the Earth. So quickly, I'm going to talk about a couple of people who study geology. Why is it that we care about this, or why do I care about it, but also why might we be more interested in it? So geology, like I said, it's important for energy, for materials, for engineering, for construction, environmental science, paleontology maybe, and a lot more. And so the people that are employed in geology tend to be in energy and mining companies, also state and federal agencies, and then also colleges and universities. These are the biggest places where there are geologists. So if you find rocks actually to be kind of interesting, quite honestly, the job market for geologists, especially in the mining industry, is going to be phenomenal by the time you're getting out of college. It's going to be unbelievable. You'll be able to get a job, no trouble whatsoever. Energy companies, there's one of those gigantic dump trucks again. You can even see it's got a set of stairs here to get up to the top, and another big bucket machine. That's actually unloading a rock that has a lot of oil in it, and they're going to process the oil and try and pull the oil out of the rock. And this giant floating tin can will have about 500 people working on it. And that is an offshore oil rig. And the companies that hire are going to be the companies whose names you're familiar with driving down the road. You're going to see Exxon, you're going to see BP, you're going to see Sinclair. Those companies that sell you gas, or sell your parents gas right now. You guys, soon enough, right? Be able to buy your own gas, drive the car. Oh. My daughter just turned 15. She's so excited. I'm so frightened. I'm so frightened. So yeah, that's a good point. So you mentioned a lot of the cars will be electric by the time you're ready to buy one. And that's one of the reasons why geology is going to be such an important college degree moving into the future, is because the mining companies that go after the material that go into the batteries, for example, like our lithium-ion batteries, where do we get lithium? Well, it doesn't just exist in the atmosphere. We have to mine it out of minerals. A mineral called spodumene. Yeah, Sounds like Spider-Man's enemy or something. Spudamine? Spider pig? Wait, who was that? Spudamine. Spudamine is a feldspar mineral that's rich in lithium. And we need a bunch of that. This is a very grainy picture of a mine that's producing this material right here. This is alabaster, which is a form of gypsum which is found in this room, not in my hand. Where is gypsum in this room? Not in the light bulbs. Good question. Good guess. Not quite that stuff, though. That's a good guess. That's right. All these walls, sheetrock. That's right. Sheetrock, also called gypsum board or gyp rock or wall board, is made with this material ground into a powder and turned into walls. And that is just one of many mines in the United States that is quarrying this stuff. It's a very soft mineral. I can scratch it with my fingernails very easily. It's got grains. It looks a lot like marble, but actually is a very different mineral altogether. It doesn't work and behave the same way at all. But you can carve this too. A lot of people will make carvings out of gypsum, but it's a much softer mineral. Right here in Virginia, not far from here, about an hour and 20 minutes away in Buckingham County, is where the slate comes from. So if you're driving down Timber Lake, you see that weird place called Ghostone? Okay? On your way towards Ward's Road from here. You pass by Ghostone, and they've got a whole bunch of slate. Well, that slate is mined right here in Virginia, in Buckingham County, by two different companies. This one is by the Buckingham Slate Company, and that's just pallets and pallets and pallets of slate pieces that people might use for walkways, but also for shingles on houses and stuff like that, old slate roof houses. If you're driving around my neighborhoods, one, I'm going to ask you why, get out of my house, but no. If you're driving around the Fort Avenue area, Fort Hill region, you're going to see a lot of slate roof on the houses because that area was like the really wealthy part of town in the 1920s and 30s. And so the houses are built with really nice stone and stuff like that. And they got their stuff back then in the 30s from these same deposits. That's a picture of two iron mines in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And for scale, down at the bottom, that little bar, this is 1 kilometer. This is over half a mile. That's a big hole in the ground. This is a mined hole in the ground. That's not much. That's just Rhode Island. So at its deepest point, that hole is 1,200 feet down from the surface. It's a quarter of a mile. What's that? No, it's not as big as Rhode Island. But that's my home state, and Rhode Island seems to be a unit of measurement. You can fit 248 in Texas. Anyway, random little bits of information. When you're a Rhode Islander, you've got like this Napoleonic complex about it. But because of these mines, we have the iron and the metal that goes into making all the little slats up over here, or the metal that goes into making this stand for the microphone, right? All of our iron, all of our steel comes mostly from the United States. We make all that stuff on our own, and it comes from mines. So here's what you use this year, actually last year. You use a lot. The amount of rocks, minerals, and ore that you are responsible for, each individual one of you, is 39,430 pounds. That's right. You don't eat sand. Like, I didn't eat that much salt. I did not eat that much salt. So where is it? Like, did your parents like put this in a storage unit somewhere? No, but you're walking on it. It does. So, no, what I mean by that is when you're outside walking on the concrete, or when you're driving down the road in your car, oh, the dawning moment of realization. All the stuff that we use every year in the United States, we can quantify. We know how much is there. And when we divide all the stuff that we use by the number of people in the United States, each and every one of them, you, me, Mr. Hill, every one of us is responsible as part of the American economy for nearly 40,000 pounds of geological materials. Much of that is coming from fuel. There's our natural gas, our petroleum, and coal. Those are some of our biggest ones, but the single biggest number is coming from crushed stone and gravel that we're using for making roads and concrete and buildings and foundations. I worked at Liberty University for 16 years. I saw a lot of brick buildings go up. We use a lot of clay to make brick and a lot of crushed stone for the foundations and the roads. So, I just said that those are the biggest ones, fuel and roads. I'm going to skip through a couple of these. I'll share with you guys this one. Colleges and universities employ a lot of geologists who teach students anything from just your basic science classes all the way up through the highly technical advanced classes in geology. One of those is my good friend, Dr. John Whitmore. He's the one who's leaning over, measuring a rock out in Arizona. He's studying a group of rocks called the Coconino Sandstone. Coconino. So we have geologists actually put names to each of the rocks because while this is a sandstone, it's not the same as the sandstone that's out in Arizona. So we have names, usually kind of geographic names for all of our rocks. And he and his good friend Paul Garner, who's a geologist from the United Kingdom, are both studying this because they were facing a challenge. The Coconino Sandstone is seen in the Grand Canyon and in lots of other places in the Arizona, Nevada area. And many geologists believe that the Coconino Sandstone was the product of sand dunes like you would see in the Sahara Desert. They look at them and say, these look like they were a dry dune that was building and building and building and depositing over many hundreds of thousands or millions of years. And as a creationist, that's a challenge to me because the Coconino Sandstone is in the middle of some marine rocks that look like they were deposited underwater. So, okay, it looks like the flood could make these. Above it are more rocks that are made underwater, so it looks like the flood made those. But then you've got the Sahara Desert in the middle of the flood, and that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So, one question to ask is, was this really made in a sand dune desert? Was this like a Sahara Desert? And so, Dr. Whitmore has been working for over 15, almost 20 years now, going out with students from his college and going out on his own with other researchers and measuring those rocks and looking at the fine details of how the sand grains are oriented in the rocks themselves and trying to discover, are these really the products of sand dunes? Let's go out to sand dunes and let's take samples of the sand in them and see what is the orientation of the sand grains in that. Are they different from places where we see sand that is being moved and deposited underwater? And what he has discovered is that there are a whole bunch of underwater indicators in this sand unit. This sandstone actually probably wasn't a Sahara-style dune. It was formed by strong, powerful ocean waves moving sand under the water under depths of like 50 to 150 feet below the surface. Those are strong waves that can stir up that deep down. And he found minerals in the sands that don't form in dry desert environments. He found other minerals that if they were in dry desert environments, like this biotite mica, yeah, it breaks really easy. If you hit this with sand a lot, you won't have any mica at all. It'll just get beaten to death because quartz is really tough and mica is not, and so the mica doesn't survive. Well, they find mica in the sandstone, which means that the mica has to be underwater. It's the only way to keep it cushioned against all the sand. So here's a great example of creation scientists who are faced with a difficult question. They're faced with a challenge. This sandstone looks like it was formed like the Sahara dunes. Young Earth creationists who think that most of the rocks were formed by Noah's flood can't explain a Sahara dune. So what did they do? Well, they could say, well, you're just wrong, and leave it at that. They could have just walked away and said, no, you just don't believe the Bible. Well, that might be true, but that's not going to give any of the rest of us any good answers. And it doesn't give them any good answers either. So what they did is they rolled up their sleeves and they went out there. Actually, they rolled down their sleeves because the sun is really hot and you get sunburn bad. But they went out there year after year after year to study the smallest details of these rocks in order to come up with an answer that says, actually, you guys are mistaken. Here is the evidence for why this was formed underwater. A challenge to creationism is met with research and a lot of work and a lot of effort, checked against other things that we know from science to see if what we're seeing is correct. So I think that's a great example of what it means to be in the world but not of the world. My friend John Whitmore goes to a geology meeting every year with his students, the Geological Society of America. It's a gathering of eggheads. All us nerds in geology get together, and there's like 5,000 or 6,000 geologists all in a building going to different talks. And he is always there every year with posters and presentations saying, this is the research that I'm doing. And people know he's a young earth creationist, and they don't like that. But they respect the fact that he's going out and doing the work and not just saying you're wrong. Let me put it this way. I don't care that evolution's wrong. Think about evolution like the whole thing, like cosmic evolution and biological evolution from like goo to you by way of the zoo, right? I honestly don't care that that's wrong, because I am not going to fixate my mind on things that are incorrect. I don't want to spend my life trying to correct people's errors, because if you're going to spend your life correcting everybody else's errors, it's going to be an irritating life. There's always things that are wrong. Instead, what are we told by Scripture? Fix your mind on things above, where Jesus is at the throne of God. Think on the things that are true. And so for me as a creationist, one of the most important things I can do is not react to everything that the evolutionists say and get all angry because there's a new article in the news that says, hey, this proves evolution. My first response should be, what did they find? What's this new thing that God has let people discover? And can I get excited about that? Somebody finds a new fossil and says, it's a transitional form, it proves that we came from apes. My first response is, no, it doesn't prove that, but I want to find out what this is. This is going to be interesting. This is going to be something fresh. In the Proverbs, it says, it is the glory of God to conceal a matter, and it is the glory of kings to search it out. You and I get to be kings and queens over creation. We didn't make the place, but God put us in charge. And that means that we must learn about it in order to be the managers that God wants us to be for it. Which means we don't get upset when somebody has a disagreement with us over something. I'll hold that call for me too. They're a little bit more interested in talking to me. They're like, yo! So what I'd rather focus on is not that evolution's wrong, but how can I discover things about creation that are right? And if you guys can think about that in your own aspect of talking with friends and being around a dance club, at wherever you're at, not to focus so much on what is wrong. We must sometimes oppose the things that are wrong. But the more that we focus on what is true and what is right and what is godly, the more the other things will melt away and not bother us so much. So, last bit. What are some things that the Bible does tell us about geology that can give us a platform to go out and do that work of stewardship and management well? Well, as I mentioned, there's a lot of geological work that seems to be happening in two spots in Scripture. The initial creation in Genesis 1, as well as the account of the flood in Genesis 7 and 8. There seems to be a lot going on in these things. God calls the material world into existence. He causes the mountains to rise and the waters to flow down into the oceans. There's going to be a lot of erosion when that happens. There aren't even any plants yet. So there's going to be rocks that God actually speaks into existence. This rock from South Dakota might be one that God said, let there be, and this was. And that can give you a different perspective on holding a rock. Knowing that maybe this thing might be something that God said, I want this to exist, and so here it is. And now, It's at the surface of the earth, and we can look at it and see it and learn about it. And darn it, it's pretty. It's a cool looking rock. And then during the flood, as the continents are moving around, as the floodwaters are rising, as erosion is happening, as animals and plants are being buried and becoming fossilized, there's a whole lot of stuff going on there. There's also some other stuff, other things of geology that are just kind of little interesting bits here and there. Like I mentioned, the location of mineral resources mentioned in Genesis 2, there's other times where mineral resources are talked about. This particular stone is being used for this or that. One of the ones that I like, as the Israelites are wandering around out in the desert, and they come to a place and they don't have any water. So what are they doing? Complaining, right? I get that. You know, there's no water, you're in the desert, you're worried you're going to die. They're complaining. And Moses petitions God. He goes to God and says, God, what should I do? And God says, hit the rock. And he does, and water comes out of the rock. But there's a detail that almost nobody notices. God says, hit the flinty rock. Flinty rock. Well, flint is a nodule of material that's made of the same stuff as quartz, but isn't formed quite the same. It's a sedimentary sort of thing, and it makes these little gray or black blobs that are just as hard as quartz. Flint is found in limestones. And limestones are frequently rocks that carry water. When God was bringing the Israelites through the desert, he actually brought them to a place where there was going to be water, and God knew that. And he told Moses, hit this rock, not just any rock. Moses didn't hit a piece of granite. There is no water in granite. But God, in his wisdom, tells Moses, hit the limestone. And when he did, he knocked off a bit. I'm thinking about how this would have worked out. As Moses strikes the rock and he knocks off a chunk of the limestone, there are cracks and seams in the limestone, and that's where the water goes. And as he cracked that seam open, the water gushed out and fed all of Israel. 2 million people got water that day. Later on, the Israelites are once again without water, and they complain to Moses, and Moses goes to God again, and God tells Moses to do what to the rock this time? Speak to the rock. And Moses gets up there, but no doubt he hears the grumbling, and you see the change, and all of a sudden, he's done great up to this point, and then he says, you grumbling people, and he's had it. And he hits the rock. Why? He learned from God how you get water out of a rock. It's the right rock. I hit that. I'm going to get water, because sure enough, the water came out. Why do you think God told him to speak to the rock this way, this time? It's because God wants everybody to know that it is God who provides. Yes, Moses could have given them water, but God takes care of the Israelites, not Moses. And because Moses took on the position of God to the people, that's why he was not allowed to go to the promised land. We look at it and we think, well, he hit the rock instead of speaking to it. No. Moses stood in front of the people and he gave them water. He even says, do I have to give you water? And he hit the rock. No. But that's an interesting little geologic fact that's buried in the pages of Scripture. Gemstone names and things like that. Aaron had the vesture, right? He had the ephod that had all these stones in it. We actually don't know half of the stones that are in there. We kind of guess because we don't know what the Hebrew words are. The stuff in the heavenly city is mentioned. That's in Greek. We know those stones really well. That's fine. So all those stones that are mentioned at the gates of Revelation, they're mentioned there. They're interesting bits of geology. So I've already talked a little bit about the layers in time and how we get that. But I hope that you guys get the sense, as we think about apologetics, it's a big discipline. It's all about answering people's questions. Sometimes they're challenges, but it's about answering questions and challenges about Christianity. But the reason that we do that is not to win an argument. We never do apologetics just to win an argument, because arguments don't become Christians. People do. And that means that when you find yourself in a discussion, hopefully, and not just an argument, you have to remember that the person you're talking to is someone who is made in the image of God, someone for whom Christ died, someone whom Jesus loves with a deep passion that sent him to the cross. And if you are to call on the name of Christ and you are to be Christ to them, you must have compassion with them too. Doesn't mean that it's always going to be easy. Doesn't mean that people are always going to be nice. And sometimes you have to walk away because somebody's just not going to listen. Proverbs has got a great proverb, and it says, "Answer a fool according to his folly." And then right after that, it also says, "Don't answer a fool according to his folly." And you're like, so what do I do? And the writer of Proverbs says, that's where wisdom is. Do you answer a fool according to their folly? What they mean by that is, if somebody is asking a silly question because they don't understand, then you bend down, like talking to a little kid, and you help them understand. You answer them according to the level of knowledge that they have. And if that's very childlike, if that's a foolish understanding, then you become a fool with them to help bring them up so that they can understand things better. But if a fool is answering you just to be foolish, then you don't answer them according to your folly. You don't engage with somebody who wants to be stupid for the sake of being stupid. That's the wisdom of Proverbs, contrasting different things that we should and shouldn't do. When somebody doesn't understand, help them. When somebody does understand and refuses, there's not much you can do. So for apologetics in geology, there's a lot of other stuff that I could have talked about here today. But the thing I'd like to at least leave you guys with is, remember that everybody that you speak to is somebody that Jesus died for. Everybody on earth. And until they die, there's always a chance for their redemption. Just as there was a chance for yours, and I hope that you've taken that. And if we do that way, and if we live by the adage in the New Testament, when John says, "They will know that you are Christians by your love for one another and for the saints," if we demonstrate that, then if we are persecuted for that, we are persecuted with Christ. But if we are persecuted because we're simply jerks, well, that one's on you. So follow the right path. Think of who you're speaking to. And don't be afraid of questions. Because questions should lead us to study God's world and His Word. So thanks, guys, very much. I appreciate it. Questions? Sure, we can take a couple questions.
Let's do some questions. We'll even turn on the good old microphone for it.
Oh.
Who has a question that they'd like to ask Dr. Ross? Yeah.
Very eager. So, I don't like that. Okay.
That's all right. What's your name?
Lydia.
Lydia, thanks for asking a question for me.
Yeah. So the calcite that's in rocks, does it have anything to do with calcium?
Yes, it does. So, awesome. Good question. Calcite is a mineral that is made of calcium, carbon, and oxygen. And so marble is made up of calcite, all the little sparkles and grains that you see here, except for the brownish, the blackish ones. The pink and the white here is all calcite. And it does an interesting thing. If you... I don't usually say that we should drop acid, but, hey, if you were to put some drops of acid on this, it would fizz and bubble because the calcium carbonate reacts with acid and creates carbon dioxide bubble gas. So it's pretty cool stuff.
Okay.
See, it's weird.
Okay, so in art, we were learning about, it's one of the Greek gods, and they no, not Athena. The other one she went against.
Oh,
Poseidon, and then he struck a rock and it had salt water to come out of it. Do you think it has anything to do with the actual, like they kind of, the Bible story, like they piggybacked on that or something?
That's a good question. I don't know. And I hate saying I don't know, but it's the honest truth. I would doubt it. I would doubt that they're picking that up from Moses, though. Hey there. What's your name?
Oh, my name is Lincoln.
Hey, Lincoln.
What's the biggest dinosaur?
What is the biggest dinosaur?
Good question.
It is a good question. Dreadnoughtus. What a great name. Dreadnoughtus. So, let's see. I don't have the computer here. But Dreadnoughtus is a fairly recently discovered dinosaur. It's one of the long-necked sauropods, so the ones with the really long necks and long, long tails. And Dreadnoughtus is discovered in Argentina, was probably about 120 feet long. No, it's a land-dwelling dinosaur. But it's a herbivore, but like, say goodbye to the forest. It's, yeah, crazy. They found several skeletons of it together. It was crazy. So a dreadnought, by the way, they named it after these huge warships of the 1700s called dreadnoughts. Hey there.
Hi. So do you like just recognize the rock because it's like muscle memory, or do you have like machines or something that like tells you?
Okay, great. So the question is, can I recognize a rock just by kind of looking at it and immediately know? So some rocks I can pick up and just know. Sometimes I always carry around with me a little magnifying lens so that I can get a close view of the rocks. Like you hold it really close and bring the rock up real close. Generally speaking, there's some, if you walk out to rocks on the side of the road, you're going to get a good sense of whether it's an igneous or a sedimentary or metamorphic rock just from a first look. Then you've got to get closer down to figure out what specific type of rock it is. But some of them can be awful tricky. All the rocks that are in the Lynchburg area are metamorphic rocks. So we have a lot of rocks like the gneisses, this one that I picked up here. If you guys know where, let's see, if you go up to Madison Heights and then you start driving west towards Elon. Yep. I actually got this rock by the side of the road next to a bridge. And picked it up because it's really cool. Not only is it a gneiss, it's called an augen gneiss, which means an eye, because sometimes this looks like little eyes in sequence or series in it, which is really kind of cool. It is nice. It's very nice. I'll let you guys know this. There's also a metamorphic rock called schist. Now, remember that extra S is important. I don't want you telling your parents that you learned wrong things from me here. Okay. Hold on, I got it here.
What's the difference between salt and sea salt?
What is the difference between silt and
Salt.
Salt and sea salt? Okay, good question. So there's sea salt, right? If you go to the grocery store, you've got sea salt, Mediterranean sea salt. Then you got those pink salt pillars, the Himalayan salt. Don't buy that. It's just salt from Pakistan. That's all. But it's not even in the Himalayas, but they're close enough that they're like, well, if we call it Himalayan salt, then people will buy it. And they do, because they're morons. So it's great marketing. So how is sea salt different? No, we have some actually as well. But sea salt, what sea salt is basically just taking seawater, dehydrating it, just letting the water evaporate out, and that will leave behind salt, and then that salt is harvested. So if you get Mediterranean sea salt, all you're doing is buying salt that was made in Spain and is being shipped over to the United States. We have an ocean too, and we can make our own salt. We do. And so if you get just regular sea salt, it's probably being made in actually New Jersey, New York, right along there. They do a bunch of that there. There's a lot of other salt that is mined out from sedimentary rocks under the earth in places like New York State, Louisiana, Kansas. Those are some places that have massive amounts of salt deposits. Some of that we use. If you get rock salt, that's what that is. And it'll say, like on the rock salt, not for human consumption. Doesn't matter. You can use it. It just might have an occasional mud flake in it from the other sedimentary layers. It's no big deal. So yeah, salt is one of those really weird things for me as a geologist, looking at it like, why do people end up buying this or whatever? It becomes like super trendy, and it actually doesn't make any difference whatsoever. Salt is salt.
Yeah.
Hey.
What's the biggest thing you've found?
What's the biggest thing I found? Let's see. My house is pretty big. But I helped to excavate a mosasaur. Not one of the super huge giant ones, but a couple of smaller ones. I've also excavated out some stuff that had tiny little fossils. We call them microfossils. Usually when we're going for those, it's like little teeth and jaw pieces from little animals. So these really cool little mammal teeth from mammals that don't live anymore. I found some of those. Some dinosaur teeth were in there as well, and some like little lizard jaws. So there's some cool big stuff like the mosasaurs that I worked on. And then there's also really cool stuff that's really tiny. And that actually is really great because those give you a chance to look at the ecosystem when excavating out one big animal is great, but it's just one big animal. So cool, thanks for the question.
All right, can we do 2 more questions?
Two more questions, all right.
Let's do 2 more. Weston, why don't you go?
I have like 2 questions, but they're kind of the same.
All right.
Like quartz and like isn't like sand, but well, how does it get the tan color?
Really good question. So it picks up that tannish color from, if you think about, if I had 2 quartz grains and I started whacking them against one another because sand is getting beaten up along the way, it will start to make little cracks all over the surface. So if I thought of this, if this was a sand grain that I'm looking under a microscope at, I would see all sorts of little cracks and pits, and that bounces the light around so that it's no longer completely clear, but instead gives us kind of that tannish white color on the beach. Cool question, thank you. Oh, okay, so how does the limestone get its color? So the limestone looks like this. It actually doesn't have any quartz in it at all. Oh. Sandstone here, right. So the sandstone is made with quartz. How come it's not just kind of like white or clear? Some sandstone is. A pure sandstone is going to look very white to light tan. Little bits of iron are giving you some of that orange-red stain in here. So sometimes there's like little bits of iron that are dissolved in the water, and then they make these little lines on it. So I've got some sandstone back at our warehouse that's all red because it's just all glued together with iron rust. And so sandstones are generally white, tan, gray, and red as colors. Those are the usual ones. Great.
Hi.
Hey.
So, as we consume minerals and rocks, and we use them in devices and gadgets, etc., how long do you think it would take till we begin to run out of usable stuff?
That's a great question, and it's a very important one because we've got about 8 billion people on the planet. Americans use more materials per person than almost any other group of people on the planet. Only Canadians use more, and that's mostly just because they have to heat their homes more because they're further to the north. And so we consume, as a first world country, a huge amount of natural resources. How much do we have left is a question that has been asked, especially of oil and natural gas and coal for a long time because there are fuels. And we have plenty of coal. We have in the United States 400 years worth of coal at current rates of use without even having to look for more. We just know we have massive amounts of it. We have enormous amounts of natural gas, enough to power us for a couple hundred years into the future, just from a few of the known units that we're already looking at right now. Oil, less, but actually kind of growing a little bit as we're able to exploit. Like some rocks have a lot of stuff in it, some rocks don't have very much. Or some rocks have a lot, but it's hard to get at. And we've developed new technologies to get at some of those hard rocks that have a lot of stuff in them, but we've never been able to get it before. That's helping to extend the life of how much we have for petroleum, for example, which gives us gasoline and diesel and jet fuel and all that sort of stuff. But those are ultimately non-renewable resources. Once we use them, we can't use them again. Rocks are non-renewable resources. The good thing is the whole planet is made out of some of this stuff. So like, are we ever going to run out of granite? No. It's just the whole continent is made of this stuff. But what about iron? What about lithium for our batteries? Lithium is the next big boon. This is the one that people are going to be looking for all over the place because if we want to switch from, say, petroleum-based gasoline cars to something like electric vehicles, we need the materials to make the batteries. And that involves a lot of mining. And I know that there are some agencies and organizations that kind of make projections as to how much we have, and it varies for each thing. We got plenty of iron. We have a good bit of copper. We have a lot of nickel, but we might be really low on platinum. And platinum is used in a variety of different things. Gold is really expensive right now. It's $2,000 an ounce. 1 ounce of gold, which would be about this big, $2,000. If somebody will buy it for $3,000, but somebody can buy it for $2,000. So, but when I was going to college, gold was $300 an ounce.
Wow.
That was a really low point for gold. But so the answer to that question is a very complicated one, and it's going to require a lot of people to think very, very out of the box to solve. And one of the ways that we can extend all of those things and think about, if we only have so much, how do we make sure that we still have some when your kids and your kids' kids are around, is simply just to not use very much. The more that we use that are non-renewable, the less there will be for the future. Some things are renewable, right? Sunlight is renewable, so we can get energy from the sun. We can get energy from wind. But in order to make solar panels, in order to make wind turbines, we need to mine. And we need to extract metals and things like that. So there's no way that this is going to be free in the future. We hope that it can be more efficient. And if we can figure out ways of doing less, all the better. The easiest way for you guys to do less, or to use less, turn down the thermostat in the winter a little bit. Our home is running at 68 degrees during the winter, and sometimes even cooler than that. Why? It's winter. Put on a sweater, for crying out loud. In the summer, my house will be 78. It's not you. It's no big deal. Your body adjusts. By not keeping my house at 70 degrees every day for all of time, because apparently that was the Garden of Eden temperature, I don't know, right? But for every degree that you put your thermostat up or down compared to what the temperature is, you save a bunch of money and you extend our resources. And the easiest way to extend our resources is just try not to use very much. So anyway, that's just one way of being good stewards. God made a world for us to use things. So don't think that using things is entirely bad. It's not. But in our tendency to be selfish, we have a tendency to use things way more and be very careless with what we use. So let's do better. Because after all, it's not our planet. It's just the one we've been told to manage. So Lord bless you guys. You've got some fun ahead of you, I think.
Yeah.
Now that I'm
You guys
done.
say thank you. Appreciate it.